Welcome to the Wealth Embodied podcast. I'm your host, Brianna Faringer, an attorney, spiritual guide, and wealth activator. I'm here to help you align your mindset for abundance and break through any glass ceilings with money. If you're ready to embrace your highest calling, manifest with more ease, and create a life that feels lighter and more aligned, then let's dive in. Hello, welcome to the Wealth Embodied podcast. I'm your host, Brianna. Thank you so much for joining me. So I'm going to talk about a topic today that a listener reached out to me and asked me if I would speak to. So I love speaking to things that people are actually asking for because something is happening in their life. And the topic I'm going to go through today will resonate with everyone, but it is specific to a person who was either an immigrant in this country or any country, or their parents, or even perhaps their grandparents have, come from another country and built a life in a new place, and how that continues to perpetuate the belief that making money is hard. And so I think this is something that everyone can get behind, because most people I know have a belief that making money is hard unless they have done a lot of work around changing their mindset, specifically as it relates to abundance. There are some people who think making money isn't hard, and maybe that's because that's the experience that they've had, which is great if you don't have this, but most people I know do have this mindset. And so even though I am talking about this specifically as it relates to an immigrant family or people with working class backgrounds, I do think that this is something that everyone is going to relate to, because even for me, I always had the mindset that making money is hard, or it had to be hard, and basically the only glory or worth was in doing things the hard way. And I am not a person who comes from, my parents and my grandparents are not immigrants. Now, everywhere down the line somewhere, all of us have immigrant ancestors, unless you are of Native American descent. And so that being said, this still will have an effect on you, even though it doesn't seem to, because you didn't see it for yourself. And I'll get into why that is. But if you've ever caught yourself saying, it's just not supposed to be easy, or, things don't come without hard work, or everything you do has to be hard, or even when you feel guilty, you may say, I feel guilty when things do feel easy. These are the mindsets that are behind this, everything has to be hard. And so I really want to dive deep into this belief that many of us carry, whether you're from an immigrant family or working class background. It's the idea that money only comes through hard work. And I want to have you start to think about, if this is you, where does that belief come from? How is it impacting your energy? And how can you shift out of it without dishonoring your roots, or the place that your parents came from, or the place that your grandparents came from, and without dishonoring the culture, because culture does play a big part in this. If your parents came here from another country that very much values hard work, and there may be some cultural or societal beliefs around work and how people make money, that is also going to have an effect on you. And so these are really, I think, fun topics to dive into, to get a sense of why it is that you have this belief that making money is hard. And particularly if you have parents that were immigrants, being able to honor what you want to do with your life, honor being able to do things differently, recognizing that what they did and the sacrifice they made was hard, but also recognizing that just because other people had hard experiences, just because your parents had hard experiences because of choices that they made, to come to a different country and to make a better life for themselves, does not mean that you have to follow that same exact path, that you can also be successful, and you can also make what you want for yourself and have the American dream without it having to be so hard, and without having to think that the only glory that you can have, or the only worth that you have, is because something has been hard. And so, I want to have you think about, if this is resonating with you, think about where this belief came from. If you don't know, it's okay, by the way. I think if you had parents that came from another country and they had to rebuild themselves, this is absolutely going to be something that you developed from them. It could have come from other places as well, though, and it's important to just look back and say, hey, where did this belief come from? Sometimes the belief is not even ours. You may just be carrying this belief because it was from one of your parents, and that's also important to think about is, how did this belief get to me? Did I develop it from seeing my parents work so hard? Did I develop it from seeing my grandparents work so hard? Other family members who may have, immigrated from other countries? Were there other people in my life that I saw just working incredibly hard? It could even be your friends' parents, things like that. And also recognizing, like, did you watch people work long hours? Did you watch them? Did things look hard? And another thing to think about is, were you being praised for struggle, or were other people in your life being praised for struggle? For example, a lot of people wear hard work like it's a badge of honor. And I recognize that because that's what I did for the almost entire, portion of my life until about 3 or 4 years ago. I believed everything was achieved only through hard work because that's the only thing that I personally knew. It was the only thing I had seen. And it was a story that I let myself live by for a very long time. I don't have that story anymore because I don't believe it's true. And I know it's not true because I've changed the way that I think about how making money feels, and that if you think something is hard, it is undoubtedly going to be hard. But for me in particular, I believed that my worth was through achievements. I believed that love was obtained through achievements. And so I was subconsciously going and doing and working hard and trying to achieve and trying to be the best and trying to be number one and trying to do this and that because I thought that was the only way that people would like me. I didn't know that love could be obtained through other ways, like you just being yourself and you being a supportive person in other people's lives, and just living your purpose. But think about where you developed this. Was it because it was what you saw? Was it because of what your parents told you? Some people's parents tell them you can only make money if you work really hard. And that's because that's the experience that they had. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's just about recognizing, where did this come from? Because it gets wired into us at a very early age often. This idea that if I'm not hustling, I'm not worthy. If I'm not hustling, I'm not going to make money. If I'm not hustling, I'm not lovable. And when you believe it has to be hard, your actions, emotions, and outcomes are going to align with that belief. It's going to feel hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to take longer. When you focus on something, not being hard, or when you focus on something being easier than you have allowed yourself to be in the past, it will start to feel easier. And that's just nervous system repatterning, right? We're just changing the way that we think so that we can change the way we feel in our body about the things that are happening. And then it doesn't have to feel so hard. And so, when we're talking about an immigrant family, or, you had a family that came from the workforce, or maybe even a blue collar working environment, there are these real things that arise, which is this is being done to survive. People had to work multiple jobs just to be able to pay for their kids. They had to work jobs that they didn't like. They had to work jobs that they probably didn't want, but it might have been the only job that they were eligible for because they had just moved from another country. There's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of limited options in what a person can do. And that can also shape your thoughts around something being hard. I would also look at, where am I thinking that my choices are limited because of things I learned from my parents, that because they worked hard, or because there was only a certain amount of things available to them, maybe because they didn't speak the language as well, or they didn't have the education or experience or training that was needed for certain jobs, where that has carried through to you. And thinking that that is still something that plagues you, even though it probably doesn't, and you have different opportunities than they did in their lifetime. And recognizing that just because these things happened in your parents' lives, and it's because, or in your grandparents' lives, whatever the thing is, that just because it's not what you want, it's not wrong. Right? That I think some people will think that because they don't want the life their parents had, or because they don't want to have to work as hard as their parents did, or they don't want to have the struggle, that they are dishonoring them, or that they are not giving them, I guess, the credit for all of the sacrifice and the work, that just because they haven't embodied those same beliefs, that they are dishonoring their parents or their culture. And I think it's just important to recognize that times change. And again, I'm going to say this, I, am coming from this of a person who has a my parents and everyone in my family is working class. I'm the only lawyer in my family. I might even be the only person that has a professional degree. I have to think about that. But, I came from a working class family where everything felt hard. Everything had to be hard. So I'm not coming at this from, I'm personally don't have immigrant parents. But one thing I do want to point out, as I was indicating in the beginning, is that we really do all have ancestral lines that have immigrants in them, unless you are Native American. So every single one of us, very likely, has ancestors that came from another country, from Europe or from somewhere else. That is in most everyone's line if you live in the United States of America. So even though your parents might not be immigrants, there is a lot of research out there about how DNA is passed and through ancestral lines, and that things like this can be passed through even though you don't know these ancestors, and even though you never met them or saw them. The patterns will carry through in the behaviors and the ways that people are raised, but it's also in our DNA. And so you may not be a person who recognizes, oh, my parents weren't immigrants, this isn't for me. Well, it's not true. You may have some of these beliefs because much further back in your line, maybe your grandparents, great-grandparents, their grandparents, or somebody came from a foreign country and went through the difficult experience of having to create a brand new life, be in a country where they didn't know anybody, they don't necessarily understand the laws, they don't necessarily speak the language, they don't have the education, they don't have the experience, they don't have the training, and are having to completely start over from scratch. And even if you did not witness that yourself, those patterns will carry through to you. So I'm just pointing this out because we inherit things from our ancestors even though we haven't seen it. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, in my line, I know that those hardships carried through to my parents and even to my grandparents because I witnessed it. And now that I've done a lot of work around it, I can see that has passed through lines, and that scarcity has traveled through my ancestral line, and this belief that everything had to be hard, and people who were very unemotional and didn't really provide a lot of emotional support to their children. Like, there's a lot of things that carried through the line that I know went back very, very far. And so, having some awareness of that, and that, like, even if you're this doesn't seem like something that you saw in your parents, these mindsets can be inherited down the line just through the way that we are raised. And so you may have some of these beliefs and not know where they came from, and that's okay. But I'm kind of pointing that out because I don't want you to think that this content only relates to somebody who came from an immigrant family or somebody who's like, first or second generation immigrants in this country, because this really does affect a lot of us. It's just that if you saw your parents going through the struggle, it's probably going to be a little bit harder for you to maybe make that shift. And when you have parents who have gone through it, they may want the same for you, or they may not appreciate or believe that one of the paths that you're undertaking is going to be fruitful, or it may not be honorable because it doesn't involve hard work the way that they had to do it. So I'm just kind of throwing around a lot of different things there, but I just want to introduce this idea of generational energy patterns and inherited trauma, which we all have. And also recognizing that you can honor the sacrifices of your ancestors without recreating their struggle. At some point, you need to break the cycle. And I do believe that's what a lot of us are here to do, is break the cycle and heal the trauma that has come through and been inherited in our ancestral lines, even if it's something that we're not immediately aware of. But the more that we do to heal ourselves, the more we are healing our lines, and the more we are healing it for future generations, even if you don't have children of your own, which I think is a tricky thing for people to understand. But I know for me, a lot of the work I have done has healed my ancestral line. And even though I don't have kids and I don't intend to have kids, I know that everything I'm doing is going to create a better future for future generations, even if they're not my own. And so the energy of struggle, it repels energy of ease and flow. Like if you have this belief that things have to be hard, things are never going to be easy. It's always going to feel hard. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been on both sides of it, I will choose being in the energy of ease and flow, because I now have had so many experiences in my life that have shown me that it can be easy if I let it, number one, if I'm open to doing things different ways, number two, if I'm curious about new ways of doing things, if I trust and surrender, just really wanting to change that feeling of everything needing to be hard. I mean, that's what leads us to burnout a lot of the times, I will tell you, is not just the belief that it has to be hard, but kind of this belief that you have to be doing something all the time. You have to be productive. I have to be doing. If I'm not working hard, if I'm not constantly busy or doing something, if I sit down and watch TV, I'm lazy. This belief that you have to be constantly doing things is not a fun way to go through life. And I know, because I lived it and now I don't live it. I allow myself to rest. I allow myself space to do fun things. I give myself a lot of downtime, way more than I did before, because I know that if I continue to stay in the energy of everything being hard and I have to be productive, that it's always going to feel that way. If deep down you believe you have to earn love, respect, money through pain, you're going to unconsciously and consciously reject ease, even when it's available to you. And you're going to self-sabotage your ability to receive rest, joy, or other financial successes. And this is about recognizing that it's not lazy to let things be easy. It's actually being in leadership. It's being in your power. It's making a choice that, look, I don't have to have everything be hard in order to get what I want. And so, I want to talk a little bit about how you handle this with family members. And I'm going to again say, I don't have this personal issue with my family members, in that they're not like, I don't have anybody who's like telling me that I need to work harder, or maybe they don't agree with my lifestyle choices or the things that I've chosen to do. But I recognize if you have immigrant parents or grandparents, and this is something that you've seen firsthand, you may have parents who are telling you that the choices that you're making are not good ones, or they may not agree with you being able to make money or be successful doing the things that you're doing. And so that's a very hard thing to address. And I can only address it from the experiences that I've had working with clients, which is, number one, you may never see eye to eye with your parents, and recognizing that is okay. I think, if you want to have a relationship with your parents, and this is a constant thing that comes up, like maybe you've decided to go down a path that they don't think is going to be successful or they don't agree with. There's a lot of cultures who think that you're only successful if you're a lawyer, engineer, or a doctor. And if you're anything else, you're nothing. That's a very, very hard place to be coming from. And sometimes that's cultural. And, sometimes there are people just who think that, even if it's not a cultural thing. But if that's happening to you, what I would tell you is you have to be willing to, I think, honor the experience that your parents had, and recognize that doing something different is not dishonoring them. If they perceive it that way, having a conversation about that and trying to, I think, have some common ground if you can. And if you can't, having boundaries around it. I tell people this all the time. If you are having conflict with people, but they're people that you want to keep in your life no matter what it's about, you need boundaries. You may need to say, look, I don't want to talk about my job, because when I do, we are not able to see eye to eye, and it makes me feel X, Y, and Z when we talk about it. And I think it would just be better if we don't, because it would help our relationship. If somebody is not willing to do that with you, then I think you have to make some hard choices in your life. I have to be honest with you. You may need to create some separation from that person and yourself, even if it's a family member. And this is such a hard thing for people to accept. Don't let your family members treat you differently than a stranger that comes up to you on the street. And what I mean by that is the people that are in our lives, whether they're family or otherwise, they have to treat us with respect because we deserve that. And if they want to be part of our lives, relationships have a back and forth component, and both parties need to be able to contribute. So if you have things that you just can't see eye to eye on, make an agreement that you're not going to talk about those, right? But you can also, for yourself, know that you can honor the struggle that your parents went through. You can respect it, but you can still have that respect and do something differently and choose to live a life of ease and joy. And I think, there's far more that work that may need to be done depending on how deep this belief runs and how profound the struggle and the need to struggle goes. So I can only do so much in a podcast, so I'm talking to general people. If I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I can really help them dig in and figure out what are the things that most need to be healed. But just trying to give you some things to think about. Setting boundaries for yourself and how you interact with your parents in these situations is very important. And so here's some steps I want to give you on how to shift this. Number one, become aware of where you're glorifying the hard path. Where are you saying everything has to be hard? And just developing an awareness first. That's number one. Ask yourself, am I choosing this because it feels aligned or because it feels familiar? We do a lot of things because they feel comfortable and not because they actually feel good in the body. We just think we're supposed to do them because somebody has told us we've had to, or because we've told ourselves that we have to for some reason. Create a new core belief. Am I safe to receive with ease? I honor my parents' path by creating my own. My worth isn't tied to how much I struggle. Something that resonates for you, that reframes this belief that everything has to be hard. Everything has to be hard if you think it is. So if you reframe that belief and get yourself to a point where you keep saying it over and over and over again, you can repattern that and you can change the way that it feels in your body. So that it's not just a belief, it's a knowledge. Like you will know to your core that money doesn't come with struggle. Releasing guilt through gratitude.